Tuning in. We value your time and pledge to make this presentation not only informative, but also engaging. My name is Jennifer Dawson, and I am an environmental regulations analyst in the regulations department at Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. So before we get started, we want to share with you this brief land acknowledgement. I am speaking to you today from Newmarket, Ontario, in the Lake Simcoe watershed, which has been inhabited by Indigenous people since creation. We recognize the Williams Treaties First Nations, including the Chippewa of Georgina Island, Rama, and Beau Soleil, the Mississaugas of Alderville, Curve Lake, Hiathwa, and the Credit and Scugog Islands, as well as the Huron-Wendat of the Métis Nation of Ontario, Region 7. We are committed to renewing our relationship and deeply appreciate the historic connection and unwavering care that they have for this land and water. If you're watching live with us today, please interact through the chat feature. We'll review questions periodically, as well as leave time for some questions at the end. This is being recorded, and we'll share this video on our website, so sit back and enjoy. Before we get going to the goals of the presentation, I want to mention that it is our understanding that the terms realtor, broker, and real estate professional all have different meanings and require different qualifications. But the motive is likely the same, in that you're all here trying to help your clients buy and sell properties. So our goal for the presentation is simple: to explain to you what conservation authorities are, how we came to be, and why it's highly relevant to your business. If there's anything you need to take away from today, it's that when you're representing your clients in buying and selling properties, there's roughly a 30% chance that the property is regulated by us, meaning that permission from us is required for development, and there may be restrictions for building. Not knowing about the applicable legislation and regulations on the lot could result in lost deals and potentially even lawsuits. So let's get going. Over the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to share 3 stories with you that get to the details about regulations, legislation, development, and our role, as well as its impact on you. The first story is going to focus on our beginnings, how conservation authorities began, and we're also going to include a historic tragedy in 1954 that helped to further enhance our role as an agency. The second story is a real-life situation that we see on a daily basis. It will explain how not understanding the role of conservation authorities or how we regulate development could potentially diminish the trust your clients have in you. The third story is more of a hands-on demonstration showing you how to use our interactive mapping so that you can be completely transparent with your clients, and you can ensure that you're giving them all the necessary background information. So let's get started with the first story we want to share with you today. This is about Ontario at the turn of the 20th century. So we're talking late 1800s, early 1900s. At the time, there was massive deforestation taking place and wetlands were being drained for agricultural purposes. These two things, combined with an extended dry season, led to soil erosion, unreliable water supply, and flooding issues. Losses of crops and livestock resulted in additional social and economic hardships across Ontario. So as you can see from this photo above, areas that were previously cleared for use as fertile farmland experienced enough erosion that they became unfarmable and unusable. Take note of the man beside the stump in the red circle. This gives you an idea of the magnitude of erosion that the province was experiencing at the time. An entire root system of a tree was exposed as soils eroded away. In response to this, the government came up with the idea of creating watershed management agencies, which are now known as conservation authorities. But what is a watershed? So a watershed is an area of land that drains water, such as rainfall, snowmelt, and groundwater, into creeks, rivers, streams, or other water bodies, and they all flow into a common outflow point. An easy analogy is to think of a watershed like a bathtub. All the water in the basin eventually drains in one direction towards the lowest point. So with this bathtub analogy, all the water would flow towards the drain, the lowest point in the tub. Well, the same principle applies in a watershed, with the lowest point being a river or eventually a lake. In our watershed, the Lake Simcoe watershed, all water drains into our many rivers and streams and eventually into the lowest point, Lake Simcoe. Let's backtrack for a minute and revisit that problem of erosion and flooding that was taking place in the early 1900s. So the government had determined that the best way to address these problems was to empower the local municipalities to join together to create watershed management agencies for conservation authorities. In 1946, with the passage of the Conservation Authorities Act, conservation authorities were officially created. And our goal, similar to how it was then, it is now, to protect people and property from damages resulting from natural hazard events, such as flooding and erosion, and to protect the natural environment. In Ontario, there are a total of 36 conservation authorities, and each have been created by its member municipalities joining together to bring them into being on a watershed basis. Because the boundaries of conservation authorities are defined by the water cycle of the certain geographical area in the watershed, our boundaries don't follow municipal lines and boundaries. There are many instances where towns or cities may find themselves split between two conservation authorities. For example, Barrie and the surrounding area is partially within the LSRCA watershed, but also borders into the Nottawasaga Conservation Area. If you're not sure which conservation authority regulates a particular property or region, reach out to us and we'll guide you. But we'll get back to more on that in a minute. So here you can see how many conservation authorities can be found within the GTA. So that's right, there are 6 different watersheds and therefore 6 different conservation authorities. So now that we have some background on the boundaries of conservation authorities, let's pop back to our mini history lesson. There was a major catalyst that happened around the 1950s that further solidified the role of the conservation authorities in Ontario. The event we are referring to occurred in the fall of 1954, October to be exact. There was a massive storm that came through and hit southern Ontario in October of 1954 after weeks of rainy weather had saturated soils. Does anyone know what the storm was? Feel free to answer in the chat function. All right, so for those of you who guessed correctly, yeah, it was Hurricane Hazel, an actual hurricane that hit right here in Ontario. And as you can see from this Toronto Star headline, it was a major storm, bringing with it 279 millimeters of rain in a 48-hour period. That's almost 11 inches of rain in 2 days. Many bridges and important infrastructure like roads were flooded and washed away. In this photo, we're looking at Highway 400 in the Holland Marsh area. And you can see how the water came right up over the infrastructure. The highway is completely covered in some areas with floodwater. In another photo from the Holland Marsh, you can see that some areas of devastation included flooding to houses, as well as some of the farms and crops of that area. In total, almost 2,000 families were left homeless as a result of Hurricane Hazel, and over 80 lives were lost. Damages from the storm totaled $100 million. If we were to convert that to today's currency, that's about $1 billion. The event was devastating in Ontario, but it did help to spur positive legislative changes with 3 main goals. The first was to protect lives. The second, to help protect people's property. And the third was to try and limit the social and economic costs associated with these types of natural hazards. Hurricane Hazel helped to put emphasis on conservation and restoration efforts. The mandate for conservation authorities was strengthened after the storm, and it allowed conservation authorities to now acquire land for conservation and recreation purposes. But most important for this audience today, floodplain policies were introduced into legislation. Since Hurricane Hazel, several updates to the Conservation Authorities Act has taken place, and those changes have resulted in today's legislation, empowering conservation authorities to regulate development and activities in or adjacent to river or stream valleys, Great Lakes and inland lake shorelines, watercourses, hazardous lands, and wetlands. These areas combined are known as regulated areas, and you can see the regulated areas of the Lake Simcoe watershed on the yellow map, on the map. The regulated areas are represented in yellow and they're bounded by red. In our watershed, around 30% of the land is regulated. The intention at the time was, and still is today, to protect people's lives, to protect their property, and to help reduce the social and economic burdens associated with impacts caused by flooding and other natural hazards. So when we say conservation authorities regulate development, what do we mean by development? In the Conservation Authorities Act, development is defined as site grading and fill placement, the construction or reconstruction of buildings or structures like new builds or even additions, the placement of a building or structure, and this includes things like garages, storage sheds, even a deck, or any change of use to a building or structure, which can include adding like a basement apartment or a separate suite above a garage. Anything that changes the existing use of the current building or structure meets that definition of development. In addition to us regulating development within hazard areas, we also regulate alterations or interference with wetlands and watercourses. So anytime anyone wants to do work in and around a river, creek, stream, permission is required from us. This includes straightening a channel, changing its course, diverting a watercourse, or interfering with it in any way. Even changing or interfering a wetland would require approval from conservation authorities. Wetlands are included since they are natural areas that tend to act like sponges. They take up water in extreme events and hold that water. They are naturally flood-prone areas and typically contain unstable organic soils. This makes them unsuitable for development. Wetlands are also key landscape features that are most beneficial for helping to build resilience in the face of a changing climate. So there you have it, the story of the creation of conservation authorities, how the tragedy of Hurricane Hazel ended up inspiring stronger regulations that have been put in place and amended to create our current unique to Ontario legislation protecting Ontarians from future tragedies. So let's move on to story number 2, regulations and your role as a realtor. The actual details of the story are made up, but it's a very similar story to what we see on almost a daily basis. So let's say we get an email from a new landowner in King City. We'll call her Sarah. Sarah and her husband Doug found a great house on a piece of land that they're planning to expand for their growing family. When closing the deal, they were assured that they would not have a problem with their future development plans. A few months after taking ownership, they start to plan out their addition. They reach out to the municipality to obtain a building permit. However, they learn that the property is regulated by a conservation authority and they will need further permission before they can build. Sarah then contacts us and we confirm that the property is partially within the regulatory floodplain and that there are certain restrictions that will apply for their proposed addition. At this point, she's frustrated with what she feels is needless red tape when she was originally told that there would be no problem. Unfortunately, we do get these types of inquiries on a regular basis, where buyers who purchase property aren't fully aware that it's regulated and what that means, and that additional sets of regulations will need to be followed in order for them to build. So what does regulated mean? What is the regulation in legislation? The short answer is that regulated lands are areas that are subject to natural hazards. The legislation that protects against these hazards is the Conservation Authorities Act and the various regulations under the Act. The Conservation Authorities Act empowers the 36 conservation authorities in Ontario to regulate development so that we can reduce the impacts of natural hazards and to help protect lives and properties and to reduce social and economic costs. What areas are regulated? Generally areas along the Great Lakes and other inland lakes, like Lake Simcoe, that are going to be impacted by shoreline flooding, erosion, as well as dynamic beaches. Also, watercourses and areas adjacent to watercourses because they are going to be susceptible to flooding or erosion. Wetlands and their adjacent lands are also considered natural hazards. In many cases, shoreline areas and floodplains seem to be attractive building sites due to their proximity to the lake or because they back onto a river. But unfortunately, structures in these areas are susceptible to damages due to the hazardous nature of the lands. Regulated lands aren't always easy to identify because it's very site specific. But let's look at a quick example here. So here we're looking at a cross section of land. So if we were to slice right through it, the blue represents the normal water level of the watercourse and likely how you would see it on any given day. Naturally, people want to be close to the water because these areas seem like attractive building sites. So in this example, you may feel safe from the water because you're up on a slope, high and dry. However, problems can start when we get a storm because as that small river grows and rises and keeps rising, eventually people and property could be put in harm's way. And what about the economic costs? Well, you have to consider the cost of things like emergency operations, evacuations, social disruptions, as well as cleanup efforts from these disasters. This is why we regulate development. Through a review of properties, our regulation analysts will advise you of these high-risk areas and help to direct development to safer locations. But as mentioned, regulated lands aren't always easy to identify. There are many factors that go into evaluating whether areas are regulated. But we don't expect you to know all those details. It's why our conservation authorities are staffed by a range of experts such as engineers, hydrologists, hydrogeologists, planners, and ecologists. The best way to confirm whether a property is regulated is to consult us so that we can provide you with all the relevant information. And that's where story number 3 comes in. So this last story is the story of the best realtor in the watershed, the one who puts home buyers and sellers at ease, the one who is informed and the one who is trusted. This realtor wins all the awards and clients are always recommending them. So how does this realtor maintain such a good reputation? They simply do all their due diligence, and that due diligence includes contacting the Conservation Authority before listing a property or helping their clients purchase one. With the right knowledge in hand, this realtor feels confident supporting their clients' future dreams and wishes. And just like every dream and client is unique, so is every property. So here is a very simple process that keeps you and your business safe and helps you and your clients avoid potential problems. Conduct a property background check against our regulations. It's as easy as going to our website and following the links from there. And to make it even easier, we've set up a page just for you. www.lsrca.on.ca/realtors. So let's do a quick check together on a property. We'll use the LSRCA head office in Newmarket as our example. So when you click on the web page, you're going to head to a link that takes you directly to your page. You'll want to scroll down and click here to look up a property to see if it's regulated by us. You're not showing your screen. Oh. Sorry, I've just notified I'm not showing my screen here, so there we go. That should help. Okay, let me just backtrack a minute. Okay, so when you click the link to www.lsrca.on.ca/realtors, you'll be brought to the homepage just for you. When you scroll down, you'll see, click here to look up a property to see if it's regulated by us. Click that link and you'll be sent to a new browser. Read through the disclaimer and hit agree. And now you're on the mapping function. And you're going to use the search function within the mapping in order to locate a property. So using 120 Bayview Parkway, which is the head office in Newmarket, you'll see that 2 different properties come up. So keep your search limited when you're using the search function, and we're going to hit 120 Bayview Parkway. By clicking on the address, it zooms down to the property, and you can see that the property is outlined in blue, and it's partially regulated by Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, with the yellow portion representing the regulated area and the red being the boundary of the regulated area. It's likely that the property is regulated because of hazards and natural features associated with this adjacent watercourse. But we have the layers that represent the individual regulatory hazards that we mentioned earlier, so we can provide you with that additional information if needed. All right, so let's check another property together. The parcel here, the one outlined in blue, actually straddles 2 different watersheds. You can also see in the mapping that sometimes only a portion of the property is regulated, similar to our example at 120 Bayview Parkway. There are many unique scenarios when dealing with regulated properties. Checking against the mapping can help, but sometimes it's not that simple. As much as we do our best to keep our maps up to date, changes on the landscape or legislation can sometimes happen before we can ensure that the maps are updated to reflect those changes. So there is a possibility that the mapping is not 100% accurate. So that's why we encourage you, when you're visiting a property as a representative of a buyer or a seller, take a closer look at the landscape and the property features. Do you see things that suggest to you there could be erosion issues? Maybe there's a steep slope, or the property is near a watercourse, or maybe there is a low wet area that might be a wetland. Even if the mapping shows that the property is outside of a yellow area on our mapping, please feel free to call or email us to confirm, just to be sure. And what can happen if something gets built without our approval? Undertaking development without permission is a contravention of the Act. While we try to work with landowners to resolve these issues, some scenarios do require further action. If convicted of a contravention, restoration of the site may be ordered, as well as additional penalties. That can end up being costly, especially if something that has already been built has to be removed. If a property is purchased with a structure or building that was not permitted, it may have to be removed by the purchaser, which can break deals and impact buyers and their agents. At the www.lsrca.on.ca/realtor site, besides the lookup tool, you'll also find a way to reach out to us. We are happy to search a property and advise of any regulatory features or concerns. So feel free to reach out anytime you have any questions about a specific property or project, and tell your clients that they can also reach out to us directly if they have any specific questions. So there you have it, a tragic story that spurred legislative action, a scenario situation that happens all too often that we want to help you avoid. And lastly, a very simple process you can undertake to ensure that you avoid situations where a misunderstanding may occur about a property's developmental potential. Protect your clients, protect your reputation. Help us ensure safety and trust for the communities and people living and working within our watershed. Thank you so much for your attention, and we would love to answer any questions or address any comments that you may have at this time. My colleague Ashley Brown will be joining me to help answer any questions that you may have. We also have another colleague that's not on camera reviewing the chat for questions, and she'll be sharing them with us as well. So bear with us as we review through. All right, if there's nothing yet, I can start with some follow-up, a bit of a quiz. A watershed follows municipal or political boundaries, true or false? So that is false. Remember, a watershed follows the water's natural boundaries. So conservation authorities are going to be set up based on the watershed boundaries, not political boundaries. So when it comes to your role, the best way to determine for sure if and how much a property is regulated by us is to contact us. And again, our contact information is readily available for you on your dedicated realtor page. So you only ever need to look up a property on our lookup tool, true or false. So that's false. Even if you look it up yourself, we always recommend that you contact us just to be sure, especially if there's any outstanding questions that you may have, or if there's a specific development proposal that is being looked at for the property.
We do have a question.
All right, I'm getting feedback here that we do have a question. Let's hear it.
What's the web address of all the conservation authorities?
Okay, so it's about whether or not there's a web link for all the conservation authorities. So yes, all 36 conservation authorities do have web pages available. And if you go to our web page that we've created for you, the www.lsrca.on.ca/realtors, there's an easy link there that will take you to a page that has each conservation authority's individual web address on it. So that would likely be the easiest way for you guys to get to an individual conservation authority's web page.
Yeah, another question. Is there an appeal?
One?
Is there an appeal process? Is there an appeal process or a way to change a boundary?
Change a boundary, as in like a watershed boundary for a conservation authority, or a regulated area boundary?
I think they're talking about
regulated area boundary. So there are opportunities to do site visits, specific studies, depending on what the feature that the property is regulated for. So conservation authorities do work with proponents when determining the exact boundaries of a regulated area. Like we mentioned in the presentation, the mapping is a great tool to give us an idea, but we always take the on-the-ground field verification or study verification of that hazard or feature. So I would suggest that you contact your local conservation authority about a specific property and the boundary, and they can work together with you to determine the exact extent of that boundary.
Do we track toxic or remediated soil?
That would be found. Oh, sorry. The next question is, do we track remediated or hazardous soils? So conservation authorities work under the Conservation Authorities Act, whereas the nature of that type of work falls under a different set of legislations and acts. And I believe it is the Ministry of Environment that houses that set of legislation for that type of contamination.
Someone's asking if they can use the LSRCA web link on their website.
Yeah, absolutely. Please feel free to use the LSRCA web link on your own website if you wish to direct your clients to our page on their own. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, someone's asking if you can show on your screen where to find the link to the other conservation authorities. They can't find it. Are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, I think you guys have sharing right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's head back to our link here. Is this showing still?
Yep.
Okay, so when we scroll down,
Find your conservation authority on the right hand.
On the right-hand side, you can see Find Your Conservation Authority under related information, that blue shaded box. So click on the link that's Find Your Conservation Authority, and it takes you to Conservation Authority, Conservation Ontario's main page. And this is the easiest way to, you can use their mapping function here to locate which conservation authority you're in. And by clicking on the area, it will provide you with their contact information. And then they have it displayed by region as well. So those in Southern Ontario, Central, Eastern, and Northern. And that will take you, by clicking on it, it takes you right to their page as well. All right.
So someone's asking, I've always contacted the Ontario Conservation Authority, I think they mean Conservation Ontario, to speak with someone regarding a property. Is this the way we should do it? They're not sure. If they're not sure which conservation authority to contact.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not sure which conservation authority to contact, I would suggest looking at the mapping from the Conservation Authority, Conservation Ontario website. And if you're still not sure, contact the one you think it is, and they'll be able to help confirm. We get calls all the time from different from proponents in different watersheds, not sure where their conservation authority lies or where the property lies. And we're able to help clarify that, as well as provide the contact information for the right conservation authority. So hopefully that helps.
No more questions.
No other questions at this time? Risk, regardless of who the owner was or who did the work.
You might have to repeat that a bit. For some reason, you got muted. So can you answer? I'm sorry, Jen.
That's
I don't know
okay.
What happened there?
Which question did you want
Just
me to
this one.
read? The one about contacting conservation authorities?
Just
If
this
you're
one
not
that we're
sure.
doing. This slide.
Sorry.
The slide you're on. If the development happened before.
Oh,
as
sorry.
future buyers.
So if the development happened before, future buyers don't need to worry. So we'll take legal action to restore land if people or property is at risk. So even if the property was developed before, again, if the property needs to be restored because it wasn't completed with proper approvals from a conservation authority, the future buyer does have to be cognizant of that.
We do have another question now.
All right, another question coming through.
Good question. Do you coordinate or facilitate regulatory processes with municipalities and other governmental bodies, or is each process to be handled separately?
Okay, so that's a good one. There's two sort of ways to look at that. So before you can get a building permit through the municipality under the Ontario Building Code, if a property is regulated or portions of the property are regulated, you will need a permit from or approval from your conservation authority prior to moving forward with the municipality to get your building permit. So there's that element. And there are elements where certain municipalities are updating their requirements for zoning, and they may have included some of the regulations within that zoning. So if it is a hazard flood area, they may include that in their zoning to show that there's no development allowed in that area. So it can happen together, but at the same time, at the end of the day, before getting your building permit, if your area is regulated, you do need a permit from the conservation authority first.
Now the question about the cost for approval from the conservation authority.
Okay, so yeah, there is a cost associated with getting a permit or approval from your conservation authority, and each of the 36 conservation authority will have their own fee schedule that they follow. With Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, the regulations department is full cost recovery. So there is a fee associated with permits. If it's a very minor permit, routine in nature, it can be as low as $600 application fee. If it's more complex, if studies are involved, if more technical staff input review, technical studies are required as part of that development, the fee for a major application is just over $5,000. So there is a bit of a range depending on what type of work is being proposed and what the property is regulated for. And there is a fee schedule found on our website as well that helps sort of talk you through those details. And if a type of development is proposed in a regulated area, by contacting us, we can help walk you through exactly what would be needed and where the work would fall on our fee schedule.
Next question. There's a question, is there a training manual or any course to help realtors understand the legends on the maps in case they need to do a quick check and don't have time to contact you?
Right. So I don't think there is anything currently, which is why we're starting to develop these web series to help give realtors information on conservation authorities and regulated areas. Again, when you're looking at our mapping through the website, it is you're getting sort of that basic base layer of what's regulated, the yellow area with the red boundary. You're not getting the specific layers of what makes up the regulated area. So that's why it is always best to contact us, because we can give you those additional details. And again, you can ask your clients to contact us as well, and that way we can relay the information directly to them. So it is usually best to contact us, especially if there is a particular proposed development that a client is seeking to undertake on a property.
Another question, do surveys reveal land impacted by the conservation authority? So do surveys reveal?
Okay, some surveys will, depending on how recent they've done, if the surveyor worked together with a conservation authority to help map out a floodplain or a hazard area. So yes, sometimes they do, but most of the time they will not. If a surveyor's just been hired to prepare a survey for a property, and there may be additional details that the surveyor does need to include. So if you are working with technical staff yourself, like a surveyor or a builder, to help determine what could be done on a property, have them contact us as well. We hear from surveyors all the time and are able to provide them with additional details so they can properly conduct their surveys when they're working in or around regulated areas.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. If there's nothing else, that is everything from us. We will also be putting a survey in the chat function that you can follow and let us know what you thought of the presentation today, if it was helpful, what we can do better. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you. And that is everything. Take care.